Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I do rise as the member for Lalor, and I'm very proud to do so. And I remind the House that the electorate was named after Peter Lalor, famous for his role in the Eureka Stockade and who became a parliamentarian, obviously. Not to be confused with the suburb of Lalor that appears on the opposite side of Melbourne. And I rise today to speak on this motion because I think it is an incredibly important motion, as is accuracy. And I would take some umbrage at the words from the member for Corangamite, because there seems to be a misconnect happening. This government cuts funds and then blames those on the end of those funding cuts for the decisions that they're forced to make and the rationalisations that they have to make ends meet. This government also, and the member opposite was careful to point out exactly what size those cuts were, and I thank her for giving us those details in terms of the actual size, and also this tendency to continually talk about that taxpayer dollar as if the ABC has ever been funded any other way. And I remind the member for Corangamite that that's why we call it our ABC, our national broadcaster. And I would go on to say that the ABC has done an incredible amount of work across the 35 years mentioned by the member for Bendigo. In fact, in my first year of teaching, one of the tasks I gave to my students in their English class when I was teaching in the Northern Territory at the time, in Darwin High School, some 28 years ago, and the 28 years is important, member for Townsville, because 28 years ago I asked my children to monitor the local media in the Northern Territory and to collect data on what sports were being covered by local radio, local television and local newspapers. And surprise, surprise, what did they find? They found 28 years ago that women's sport was getting very poor coverage locally. It was getting some coverage, but it was marginal compared to men's sport. In 1985, my students found that. They'd be shocked to know that those statistics are now being re-echoed across the years. And I did a bit of research. In 2006, the New South Wales Department of Sport and Recreation did a similar survey on media coverage of women in sport and found that the gender breakdown of sports media coverage in 1996 was television 2%. 2% of television coverage on sport went to women's sport. 56.2% went to men's sport and 41.8% to mixed sports. It was better in the newspapers in this era in 1996. It was 10.7% in newspaper coverage. But between that time and in 2006, and I want to quote this because I think it sends some important messages. The New South Wales Department of Sport and Recreation said that women have made a consistent and significant contribution to Australian sport at all levels. Yet their achievements on the whole receive limited coverage by the mass media. The quality and quantity of the coverage of women's sport by the media is not an accurate reflection of the amount of sport played or watched by women. Media coverage is generally inadequate and selective. A high media profile is essential for attracting sponsorship, spectators and other sources of financial support. In 2006, that's some years after the survey my students did. In 2012, I found an actual submission that the ABC put to a Senate inquiry into women in sport and recreation in Australia. And in this report, it tracks some of the history of the ABC and the good work it did do in covering women's sport and increasing the coverage of women's sport. Since 1975, it says, ABC Television has been broadcasting the National Netball Competition. Case in point, which we now know has gone to pay TV. That means that my small netball team that I coach on a Saturday morning, when I say to them, did you watch those intercepts Laura Geitz took last week, and the member for Herbert knows very well, did you watch the Firebirds game yesterday or did you watch the Phoenix game? Are you going? They say, we haven't got Foxtel, miss, can't watch it. But back in recent history, the ABC, of course, covered the national basketball, covered the Trans-Tasman netball. In 1982, the Australian women's hockey champions were covered by the ABC television for the first time. In 1982.
I thank the member
The Australian
for
Women's Hockey
time has
Championship.
expired.